Finally, a portable power station that I can actually say more people would be willing to buy. And it's for one very specific reason. It has a built-in UPS feature that is actually awesome. What's up YouTube, Jason here with Byte My Bits, and in today's video I am talking about the Vigorpool Captain 1200, aka this thing sitting right next to me, weighing in at 33.5 pounds. This thing can deliver up to 1200 watts of power. It's running off LiFePal batteries, which is what I call lithium iron phosphate batteries, and can handle up to 3500 recharges before you start getting to an 80% battery capacity. Now I know I've been down this whole portable power station rabbit hole for a while now, and I can actually say this is one of the first batteries that I can legitimately say that I could recommend for just the average everyday consumer who may want a UPS for, let's say, a computer or something like that, but definitely doesn't go outside or have any reason to get a portable power station because they don't leave their house anyways. You have to have a need before you want to spend your money, which is fine. 100% understand that. It actually has a legit UPS system. Like you can actually bypass the batteries, power your devices, and separately, if needed, charge the batteries. A complete battery bypass is definitely different from let you use the batteries while you charge them. What most power stations do today is exactly that. They charge the batteries, you draw from the batteries, ultimately you're creating wear, heat, power loss, etc. But having a built-in UPS relay, which by the way, it will switch over to battery in 10 milliseconds. A real UPS, like we're talking a CyberPower or APC, something like that, it's usually like a 4 millisecond to a 6 millisecond switch time. Those are running on like lead acid batteries. So at 10 milliseconds, depending on what you're running, you probably won't ever notice it going down. And that includes computers. Of course, that's gonna depend. If you got like an old computer running Blue Iris, let's say, and the power supply really sucks, it may not be able to handle 10 milliseconds. But if you have a newer, better, more efficient power supply, something with a little bit more headway in the actual power circuitry itself, 10 milliseconds is not going to be a big deal at all. Either way, being able to plug this thing in, this thing can charge off the wall at 800 watts, by the way, it's pretty crazy. Being able to plug this thing in, bypassing the batteries completely, allows more than a couple different benefits. The first one is the obvious: less wear and tear on the batteries. But the second one is just a little less obvious, and that is the capacity to use it as a UPS. Hear me out. If you have a charging capability of 800 watts and you have an inverter capability of 1200 watts, if you are going to try to use a regular power station that just does the charge your batteries while you draw it thing, yeah, sure, you might be able to pull 1200 watts off of it, but you can only charge it 800. And since it has to route through the batteries, that means if you use anything over what it is rated to be able to charge at, it is going to be draining your batteries consistently until it's dead. However, with the battery bypass, I was able to, just for example, plug in an 1100 watt device, draw that full 1100 watts directly through this, not even touching the batteries or the inverter, and still the display was telling me what was left over to charge the batteries. It was like, hey, you're pulling 1100 watts, but we're also doing like 130 watts worth of charging to the battery. So why does that make this more appealing to purchase for the common person? It's simple. If you want a UPS for a device or a set of devices and it's going to be, let's say 800, 1200 watts, whatever, you want a UPS for these devices, but you also kind of sort of maybe want a power station once a year when you actually leave the house. I'm not saying that's all I leave the house is once a year. I'm just saying if that's you, this serves a dual purpose because you can bypass those batteries and not have to worry about arbitrarily wearing down or degrading the capacity of those batteries just by using it. And then if something comes up and you're like, man, I want to go outside and I need a fan, I need an air conditioning unit, I need a TV. Boom, you go in, you grab this thing, it's probably already fully charged, you're good to go. Well, maybe fully charged. I'm gonna get into the app smart features, it has that, but let me jump into a couple of the specs that it has. The Vigorpool Captain 1200 is a 1200 watt capable system with 1,280 watt hours worth of capacity, can handle 3,500 cycles before you get any kind of degrading to the battery, and everything that I just said can be doubled. That's right, on the back of the battery, they did not send me two. I did not test this. Yes, you need a special cable. They sell you the cable. But if you were to, by any reason, need more than 1,200 watts, This is it right here. If you get 2 of these units, get the cable, connect them together, it makes the inverters work together. And since on the back of the device you have 4 20 amp outlets, 4 20 amp capable outlets. If you have 2 of them, now you have 8 outlets. I don't think you're gonna need that many, but just in case you did, it will transfer power back and forth between the 2 different devices, depending on which device needs to draw the most power. So you could literally just have one device sitting there providing nothing but the inverter capacity to the other device and have everything drawn through one device. That's 2,400 watts worth of capacity if you were to get 2 of these. Something I do wanna say though, is that this cable connects the inverter and the inverter only. What that means is you cannot plug in one and charge the other. All this does is use the inverter from the other one to provide power to the outlets, which is fine. I mean, this thing can charge at 800 watts. I mean, I'd rather just plug in the other one anyways. I'd be getting like 1,600 watts. But you get double the battery capacity and double the inverter capacity and double the cost. But at least it all works together, right? Now on the front, this is where the magic happens. You are greeted with 4 USB outlets, 2 of which are USB Type A, they're 18 watt, and then 2 USB Type C at 100 watt. And yes, you can use both USB Type C at its rated capacity of 100 watts each at the same time. You have this very informative screen that shows you everything about the device, including how much you're discharging, what your percentage is, how long it'll take to discharge or recharge. It'll tell you whether or not you're running off like 50 hertz or 60 hertz electricity, because you can use it other places and they run off different hertz. And it also displays certain indicators like, are you using a UPS? Is the smart Wi-Fi connected or in setup mode? That is one big thing that I look for on these devices, is a screen that just displays the information that you're going to want to find out. So it's nice, it has everything, 0 complaints on that. In fact, you can even go into the app and set it to never turn off, which is cool, especially if you want it on a UPS mode and you're like, you know what, I will just take that 2 watts or whatever it takes to just run that screen 100% of the time. Back to the outlets, you have your standard 12 volt cigarette charger with 2 standard DC connections out. They all share the same 10 amp circuitry, so you can't overload it or draw any more because they're all connected to the same thing. But the 12 volt is actually regulated at 12.9 volts or 13 volts. And it's truly regulated, which is a good thing for devices that are very sensitive to having that 12 to 13 volt range. You take the regulated 12 volt thing and you got the pure sine wave of the inverter. Like, there's a lot of boxes on my list of things that I like about it that are just being checked right now. At the bottom of the front, you have the area of which where you can plug in a standard, I think it's called a D-Link cable, just a standard cable, like a computer cable, something like that, that will take electricity directly from the wall into this unit. You do not need a brick. All you got to do is plug it in. Super awesome. Another little checkbox for me. Then if you just happen to pop some internal circuitry, you have a fuse reset, and then you also have your solar input, which is a standard Anderson connection, and you can connect up to 400 watts worth of solar charging with this. 2 things here. One, I tested these out. Okay. I tested these out. You might be able to see the other one in the background sitting there, but Vigorpool actually sent me over 2 200 watt solar panels. There's really not a whole lot to say about these solar panels aside from it has a nice long cable. If you want to connect 2 of them, you are going to need an extra cable, which they sent that connects 2 of them. But you are going to have to get something to allow to run these in series to hook up to your device. Actually, come to think about it, that cable that connects them, I'm not sure if that cost extra or not. I just know that I had one. I just think it came separately. Either way, they have different solar panels out there. I think different wattage, 1, 2, and 400 watts. They sent me 2 200 watts, which I did put to the test, and they work like every other foldable solar panel out there, and they're a nice color. Back to the cool stuff. Check this out. You can actually charge this thing from the wall and with the Anderson connection at the same time, which means you can push 400 watts through Anderson, hypothetically, if you can have something that's going to give you 400 watts worth of actual power through the Anderson connection for a total of 1,200 watts charging capacity. Of course, real world usage of this is going to be a little difficult unless you're artificially creating the DC needed to get that extra 400 watts. Just because, like, for example, I had, these solar panels out and they were connected and I was getting anywhere between like 250, 230, 300. I mean, this is how solar works, depending on where the sun is, how well you placed it, is there any shadow at all? I mean, everything drops down the wattage of what you can do. So even if you have two 200-watt panels and you have them both running and they're in direct sunlight, you are still not going to have an exact 400 watts worth of electricity. Especially with this, because this is one of the things, the input voltage range for solar is 12 volt to 52 volts. And it has a hard cutoff. It's like, if you go 53, 54, it'll shut you down. So if you were to try to oversize your solar array in order to get that maximum up to 400 watts, you'd have to be really careful with your voltage, because if you go over your voltage, you're gonna have a bad time. That hard cutoff thing is something I really wish they would have included with the inverter, because it kind of has a weird feature that I just do not agree with at all. This thing has an output capacity of 1200 watts. I was able to get 13 to 1400 watts for a sustainable amount of time, like 3, 4, 5 minutes without any kind of problems. And I'm definitely not advocating for going over the recommended wattage on a device like this. All I'm saying is that I appreciate when devices are capable of going slightly over what they're rated for. What I do not appreciate is the way Vigorpool handles really going over what the device is rated for. See, every other power station that I have reviewed, once it hits its limit, it shuts down. It says, no, I can't do this. This is drawing too much power. Inverter overloading, heat's building up, whatever. It shuts down. It actually has a built-in cutoff. This does not. This one instead has a feature, it's like a boost or power or something. I don't know what to call it, but it has a feature that will keep your inverter on, but it will reduce the voltage to regulate the overall power output. Which, if you're in like a testing environment that I was, using heat guns and space heaters and fans and stuff like that, those are not as sensitive to voltages as other things. They just simply don't work. I mean, when I hooked the heat gun up to this and cranked it up and it just got too high, this thing would lower down the voltage and you could hear it in the heat gun, but the heat gun was still actually trying to work. And I have a problem with this. I don't like this. I don't like this because not every electrical device out there is a heat gun. Not everything is capable of handling an AC voltage droppage like that. I mean, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, you buy something like this, you use it as a UPS, you plug in a couple computers into it, right? You're running at 900 watts. Everything's great. But then for whatever reason, your graphics card kicks in and it puts you over the wattage. This is a great recipe for frying your electronics, which is really probably the biggest thing I don't like about this power station. You can fry stuff having lower voltage than what is expecting. And if this thing will not shut off and actually cut them off, that is a terrible feature. So if you just happen to be in search of a UPS that you can handle, take on the go or whatever, you got to make sure that you're going to be within that wattage, depending on what you're going to be using the UPS for. Just saying. The next thing I want to talk about is the smart feature, which ironically enough was the thing that made me actually read this email. It has Wi-Fi built in, which caught my interest. I'm like, Wi-Fi on a portable power station? That's weird. It actually has smart features built in that connects to Wi-Fi and allows you to use your phone, tablet, whatever, in order to control it wirelessly. That's freaking cool. I gotta be honest, this is, again, a first for me. So I probably spent like way too long kind of fixated on like turning lights on and off and messing with how strong they were and just like changing, flashing, SOS. I was just kind of like really impressed by the whole smart control power station idea. And I don't want to gloss over the lights like that. Like, these lights are probably one of the best lights that I've ever used. They have really great positioned lights, and it's key there because the way they're positioned, and there's two of them and you can use them independently. So for example, when you go out camping, you have a table, you got all your food, right? If you want this sitting on top of that table, allowing people to plug in their phones or devices or whatever, you can actually go over here and use the buttons to turn on and off the lights, and you can make them higher, lower, you have an ambient or a full, and you can basically just light up that area of the table, which is really cool in a camping situation. It's because depending on your setup, you may or may not have that many lights. Tangent over, back to the smart features, let's go. From the app, you can see everything you can see on this screen and more. You can see the temperature, the discharge, what you're pulling, what you're charging, how much time it's gonna take to do whatever. You can turn on or off everything. You can control the USB outlets independently from the top wireless charger. You can turn on and off the DC out. Again, they all share the same circuit there, but you can turn that off independently as well. And of course, you can turn the inverter on and off. But taking it to the next level with this smart feature, you can go into the settings and you can change things like making the screen never turn off. Again, that's something that I oddly am just really excited about. You can also set the device timeout to where it'll just shut off after however many minutes or never. And you can even customize your battery charging percentage. So for example, Tesla has a big thing with their wall batteries that they normally only charge to, I think, like 80%. And that's based off of maintaining the best possible battery life for as long as possible. So if you wanted to use this device as a UPS and maybe you would only want to run it at 80% just to maintain those batteries, you could. You could do 60%, you could do 40%, but 80% is probably going to be that magic number. And on top of that, again, depending on how you want to approach the longevity aspect of this, you can even slow down the charging. You can take it from 800 watts input to 400 watts. That's more of a battery saving feature than anything. If you're just using this sparingly going out and camping, you're gonna wanna probably charge it as fast as you can. But if you're running it as like a UPS thing and stuff goes down, it drains the battery, and then it's, once the power comes back on, you don't really care how fast it charges, then it's probably better to charge it slower. And all of this is controlled through the Vigorpool app that you download on your device. With one problem, one thing that I see not necessarily wrong with it, but just something, and I can't even say that I dislike it because I wholeheartedly understand. It's the requirement of having a Wi-Fi access point in order to access those smart features. See, this thing only comes equipped with Wi-Fi. So once you connect it to, let's say, your Wi-Fi network at home, maybe you drag it in your computer room and you want to use it as a UPS for your computer, everything's great. You have your smart features on, you can turn the lights on, you can that's great. But if you grab this to go out camping with or use something out in the open and you're outside of the range of your Wi-Fi, you don't have those smart features anymore. There's no short range like Bluetooth or anything else that's going to allow you to connect your phone to your power station. So when you're out in the wild, unless you have a Wi-Fi access point to connect to, it's just not going to work. I mean, this isn't a huge flaw or anything. There was literally only one time where while I was sitting down out in the field, like camping, I was like, I think those lights are on low. I want to get up and change those lights to high, but it would be great if I could just use my phone. It's not really that big a deal, just something to note. You do need Wi-Fi, no other short range capabilities. At the end of the day, this thing has real world benefits for the real average consumer that serves two needs for those consumers. One, as a UPS backup for whatever device you want to run in your house within the wattage capacity. Two, you can grab and go, take it out camping, whatever you want to do, and you can go right back home and plug it in when you're done. In my opinion, that opens up their customer base significantly because of the UPS battery bypass feature. We got smart features with Wi-Fi, super awesome lights on the side, and all of that. You can also, I forgot to mention this before, I just thought about that. With all of that, you can even hook up a ground wire. It has a ground wire option, so just by any chance you want to run this and you want to actually make sure this device is grounded for all the internal circuitry, you can do that. Capable of 1200 watts, sustainable at 13 to 1400 watts for at least 4 or 5 minutes in my testing is pretty impressive, especially if you consider the overall price depending on when you buy it. I think this thing releases on August 1st and their suggested retail price is $1,400, which is a little steep. Between now and August, they have a pre-sale thing going on where they're selling it for, last time I checked, was $800. I'm gonna turn that off. Fans kicked on. Yes, Vigorpool is a pretty new company. But from what I'm seeing in build quality, so far the product has been pretty stout, with the exception, this bugs me, with the exception of the inverter dropping the voltage thing. That just gets me. I need a firmware update. I need that feature disabled. I'm throwing that out there. This is not doing anybody any favors. There's absolutely no reason, in my personal opinion, to have an AC power device that requires, or at least is expecting 110, 120 volts. There's no reason to drop voltage down to 85 or 90 volts just to protect the inverter. There's absolutely no reason for that. At least I can't think of a reason. To me, all I see is a risk. Whatever you plug in there, if you go over that 1200 watts, you're going to run the risk of it dropping the voltage to save something versus just turning off. And you could run the risk of harming an electronic device. So guys, as always, if you have any questions, comments, or complaints, make sure to leave those in the comments section down below. I will link to this device in the description, so make sure to check that out. And if you see this before August 1st, and this is actually something you want to consider, again, they say what the suggested retail price is, but I don't know what it's actually going to be. I would heavily consider it before August 1st. But as always, guys, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe below, and have yourself a great day.